What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and welcome into the second part of this quick little two-part series where we are going over the top storylines for the Red Sox going into 2023 spring training. Now, on Monday, we talked about the pitcher and catcher storylines because on Monday, the 13th, pitchers and catchers who are participating in the World Baseball Classic were required to report to spring training, but also it was made available for other pitchers and catchers. So you saw the first group of those guys start to report in spring training. Today is when all pitchers and catchers are required to report to spring training. And then if you guys want a quick update on the schedule, tomorrow World Baseball Classic participants who are position players are required to report to spring training, and Saturday spring training officially begins. But before we get into the actual spring training itself, we need to finish up these storylines. So today in this video, we are going over the top storylines to look out for, what you need to know before spring training in terms of position players. But before we get into that, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button if you haven't already. Both of those help these videos out a ton and would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Just like in the last video, we're going to start off with what I think is going to be the biggest covered storyline throughout 2023 Red Sox spring training. And for position players, it should be fairly obvious. And that is, what does the middle infield of this Red Sox team look like? More specifically, what does the depth at the middle infield position look like for the Red Sox going into 2023? Because if we take a look at how the team is structured right now, it's fairly obvious that Kike is going to get the most reps at shortstop. Christian Arroyo will probably be our starting second baseman, but outside of that, who else do the Red Sox have to man some of these infield positions? Now, you do have Adalberto Mondesi, who unfortunately is injured right now and who may or may not get any reps during spring training. He may not even be ready to go for opening day, which makes the point of middle infield depth even more of a storyline to cover in spring training this year. Now, you do have a ton of options, and you're probably going to see a ton of guys get some reps in the middle infield throughout spring training. You've got the conventional 40-man roster guys like Emmanuel Valdez and David Hamilton, who are prospects throughout the minor league system. David Hamilton hasn't played in AAA yet, but he is one of the fastest prospects in all of baseball. He led the league in stolen bases last year, set a minor league record for the Red Sox. Not a great bat and a pretty decent defender. He's a guy who you could see get some reps at second base and at shortstop throughout spring training, and who could possibly make the roster to start the year in 2023. You have Emmanuel Valdez, who is not a good defender, but does have a pretty decent hit tool and a very high upside in his bat. So that could be a guy as well you see on the bench to start the year in 2023. Then you've got some 40-man options who are a bit unconventional, right? You've got, in the worst case scenario, sometimes they play first base, but for the most part, those bench spots are pretty much reserved to catch only. So having a guy like Connor Wong, who could be versatile in that bench role, would be absolutely fantastic. You've got Rob Refsnyder, who again would add versatility to the bench. He's played some second base, he's played some shortstop in the major leagues. He could be a guy that gets some reps during spring training, but in my opinion, for the most part, they're going to focus him as sort of the fourth outfielder because he's going to help a ton, especially with the defense wise of this current Red Sox outfield. Really unconventional players like Jarren Duran, who was drafted as a second baseman for the first year in the minor leagues, did play second base before he did make that switch to center field. Now, obviously, defensively, he's not a great center fielder. He's still sort of getting used to the position right now, but if you move him back to second base, maybe the change in scenery really helps him out and he goes back to a more natural position, something he's been playing for a while. Maybe it even gives him more confidence at the plate. Jarren Duran is also a lefty, which would be a great platoon for Christian Arroyo, again, if it all works out. So you could see Jarren Duran get some appearances at second base in spring training, and you could also see, surprisingly, Bobby Dahlbeck. Now, towards the end of the year last year, we started to hear rumors that Bobby Dahlbeck was working out in different positions. We saw him at shortstop at one point in the 2022 season. Obviously, that was sort of a last resort, but he is athletic enough to play more than just first base and third base. He's pretty underrated in terms of his speed, and his athletic ability is really strong. So there is a possibility that the Red Sox think about putting Bobby Dahlbeck in that middle infield just to add some depth to this Red Sox Sox bench, right? Because if you have Bob who can play first base, third base, and second base, as well as Connor Wong on the bench who can catch and play some middle infield, that is a really versatile bench. So to me, you're probably going to see a lot of 40-man guys who you wouldn't really expect to play middle infield to start the year in spring training. Now, you also, on top of all of those guys who could be possible options, you have non-roster invites, guys who aren't on the 40-man roster who were invited to spring training, and there are a ton of middle infielders on that list. You've Ryan Fitzgerald, who personality-wise, in my opinion, would be a fantastic fit for this 2023 team and just for Boston in general. He's also versatile on the field. He can play almost every single infield position, and he's pretty decent at the plate. He hasn't really had a sort of breakout year in the minor leagues yet. He is a little bit older, but he could be a really nice addition to this bench in terms of versatility. After that, you got Nico Goodrum, who is a switch hitting middle infield utility type guy as well, and that's always valuable. But at the same time too, Goodrum had a really rocky last couple of years and a really rocky last year with the Houston Astros. We're gonna have to see if he can put together some decent at bats in spring training in 2023, but if he can, there is some potential there with him as well. You've got Christian Koss, who's pretty much in the same boat as Ryan Fitzgerald, a sort of AAA utility type player who hasn't really put together a stellar season at the plate, but does bring you that versatility and solid defense wherever he plays. And you also have Matthew Lugo and Nick Sogard. Now, I don't really know if these guys are super in the running for this position just because there's going to be so many guys ahead of them, but they're also invited to spring training, and hey, they're both second basemen, they're both shortstop. You're probably going to see them at some point. There is a possibility that one of them does really well and snags that last roster spot. At the end of the day, in terms of middle infield possibilities for this Red Sox team, I think it's pretty safe to say that the starting positions have been fairly locked down. I think Kike Hernandez at shortstop is a guarantee at this point. Christian Arroyo at second base should be the right move, barring any sort of injuries or anything like that. In my opinion, this sort of storyline is going to come down to who is the depth for this Red Sox team, especially with Mondesi still being injured. Who is going to be the guy with that last spot on the bench as the sort of middle infield depth piece? Keep an eye out on what goes on with the middle infield for this Red Sox team. After that, in my opinion, the second biggest thing to watch out for in spring training, or the biggest storyline that's going to be covered, is Masataka Yoshida. Now, Yoshida is playing in the World Baseball Classic for Japan, so he's not going to get a ton of games with the Red Sox, but in the games that he does play, I'm going to be watching his plate approach, right? I don't really care about the actual results, considering he's probably going to be playing a lot of AAA guys who are trying to make their major league rosters. What I care about is his approach, his plate discipline. Does that differ any in Major League Baseball? Is he trying to acclimate himself more than he probably should be, right? Is he staying true to himself at the plate? In my opinion, that's going to be the most important part of Yoshida and watching what he does during spring training. Again, it's spring training, so I don't really care about what the actual results, his average on base percentage, stuff like that is. All I care about is his plate approach. I also am very curious to see what he looks like on the field, right? It's been assumed and reported that he's not exactly a good defender, but at the same time too, there are guys who have covered Japanese baseball who did put out articles talking about the dimensions of the fields that he played in Japan and why he could be a bit of an underrated fielder. Maybe that's something that surprises us during the 2023 spring training, so keep an eye out on that as well. And it's not just Yoshida in general, it's all the new guys, right? That's going to be another big storyline. All these new players, Turner, Duvall, Yoshida, all for the first time putting on that Red Sox uniform. What does Turner look like in a Red Sox uniform? Duvall, Masataka Yoshida. Do they look healthy, right? Especially with Duvall and Turner. Duvall had a bit of a rocky year when it came to health last year. Is he good to go this year? Turner's getting older. Is he starting slow like he did in 2022? Those are going to be things to definitely keep an eye on. But outside of just play, right? Outside of just looking healthy, both of these guys, Turner and Duvall, have both been pretty highly praised in terms of their clubhouse presence, right? Turner specifically has been kind of already labeled as a going to be leader of this Red Sox team. So what does that look like? Is he a guy who comes in and right away makes his presence known in the clubhouse, says, hey, look, I've been here, I've done that, here's what we're gonna do, here's how we're gonna do it? Is he that type of guy? Is he a guy who's gonna take a while to acclimate himself with the team before he takes on that sort of leadership role? Duvall, is he going to really bring something else to the clubhouse right away? Is he going to be quiet and bring himself into the clubhouse naturally? What is all that going to look like? We're probably not going to see a lot of that in spring training, but we're definitely going to start to get glimpses of it. And that is going to be something I am focused on heavily as we go through spring training, because for this team to work, it's going to have a lot of good vibes. And these guys supposedly are two guys that can really bring that to this team. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about in terms of storylines for this Red Sox team going into spring training is the rule changes, right? How is that going to affect the Red Sox approach? We're probably not going to see a full game plan in spring training, but we're going to get snippets of it. With the pitch clock, with the band and the shift, are we going to be more aggressive in the zone? Are we going to go for more hits? Are we going to be more patient, try and go for more walks on the bases, right? With the bigger bases, the pitch clock, the pickoff attempts being limited, right? Are we going to be more aggressive on the bases? Are we going to go for an extra base when we can, going for doubles instead of singles, triples instead of doubles? Are we going to lay down more bunts? Are we going to steal more bases? And again, we probably won't see a full-fledged game plan because that's usually not how spring training works, but we are going to get glimpses of that, especially towards the end of spring training when you start to get that full starting lineup type lineups that you're going to see on opening day. So in my opinion, that one's going to be the most interesting because that's going to be how the Red Sox approach at bats throughout the regular season. So hopefully we get a pretty good insight into that as well. And that's kind of it for storylines for this Red Sox team. There are a ton of them going into spring training. Obviously, we're going to cover all of them here, but before we get into actually spring training, let me know what you think of these storylines so far. Which one of these intrigues you the most? Which one of these are you like, I don't really care about? Are there any that I did not mention that you were like, Corbin, we need to keep an eye on this? Let me know all your thoughts on spring training storylines down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You made it to the end here, you might as well hit that sub button. You also might as well hit that like button as well. Helps these videos out a ton, and it would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.